Hello, hello, and welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, here with Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello, hello.
And this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
Thank you all for joining us for yet another week of the shitstorm. We are in the middle of it right now. So we're recording this as the results come in from New Hampshire. And we have been checking on them here and there. It seems pretty evident that Bernie Sanders will win, although, that's the type of thing they like to rig at the last minutes, where they're like, the machines went down for 2 minutes, and now Buttigieg has godillion extra votes. You're like, that's not a number. They're like, no, it's true. I saw it right here in the machine. But as of right now, with like 25 or 27% in, Bernie Sanders doing quite well. And Buttigieg in second. And Biden getting trounced.
Could be because he can't stop telling people to go fuck themselves.
The latest one was pretty amazing. What was he called?
Never even heard this term before.
Well, what's amazing is she wasn't even asking a difficult question. She said,
basically this woman asked why Biden didn't do that well in Iowa, and then he proceeds to ask her, "Have you ever been to a caucus?" Which, first of all, not important.
Doesn't matter.
That's not a response to her question.
Doesn't matter.
So he then asked her if she's ever been to a caucus, and she says yes.
So
and then
he then says, "You're a lying, dog-faced pony soldier."
Which I don't even know what that means.
Which, to stereotype, something I've noticed about women is they don't like to be called dog-faced.
Do men like to be called dog-faced?
That's why it was a joke, all right?
Oh.
You don't need to jump on it like that. It's such a ridiculous joke. But what I was saying is, I think I see what's going on with Biden, which is he's in the early stages of senility, and both my grandparents, my grandparents didn't go totally Looney Tunes, but they got kind of senile, and both of them, the first thing to go in the early stages was their filter. They just started saying things where you're like, Jesus, Grandma. Oh, my God, with that mouth. My grandfather would just be like, fuck you. So there's a certain filter that starts to go first.
However, to be fair, your grandparents weren't racist war criminals.
No, that was not on their resume, but not for lack of trying. No, I'm kidding. I love my pappy and grandpappy. I don't know, I've never used those terms before.
Yeah, no, it's clear.
Biden getting trounced. But here's what the mainstream media did to set this up, to set New Hampshire up, was they basically made it impossible for Bernie Sanders to truly win. And they did that by basically being like, oh, he's going to win so easily. Oh, look at the polling. Oh, he won last time. He's going to win by 11 points. He's going to win by 20 points. And by doing that, when Bernie Sanders wins at any level, they can then make it a non-story. Oh, we expect it. Oh, it's normal. Oh, okay, nothing big here. However, if Buttigieg, who they, were making it out like he was going to lose by 20 points, gets within 10 points or 5 points, they go, oh my God, look at how well he did. He has surged to have 8 votes in New Hampshire. So they've set it up so that Bernie can't really get a bump from this.
And I was sort of, because I can't, unlike Lee, who has the ability to watch things like CNN, I would just, my brain would be.
Well, it's not like I enjoy them.
I mean, my brain I'm on the struggle bus right now, as it is, because I'm a little under the weather. But I don't know how you watch CNN and still come out at the other side. But I was sort of hearing it in the background while you were setting up the podcast, and this guy said, "Well, it's clear that Bernie's doing well, but the question is he bringing out voters?" And I was like, what?
What does that even mean?
How could you be doing well if you weren't bringing out voters? I don't understand the question. So basically, no, and this is just, there are so many examples of this, but it's like, how can we shit on him while acknowledging that he's winning at the same time? Yeah, you're winning, but do people like you?
Right.
What?
Right. MSNBC during the Iowa caucus, even as Bernie Sanders was winning, was saying, I think the story of tonight is that Bernie is not exciting people like he did last time around. And one of them literally goes, you can see he only has 27%. Last time he got 52%. There was something like that. And
right.
I was like, There were only 2 people in the race last time, asshole.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, I mean, this is just basic idiocy being spouted by these fucking clowns because they've got to create any story to stop Bernie Sanders. And, you know, this is not my show and Eleanor's show and this podcast are not just a rah, rah, rah Bernie Sanders show, but it is, we are basically just want to talk about how much the system will try and stop even a mildly progressive candidate. Bernie Sanders in any other country or a lot of other countries would be viewed as a center left-wing candidate. He would not be viewed as radical. He would not be viewed as, oh my God, socialism is infecting the country. Like, he'd be viewed as a, you know, FDR kind of centrist, like center
Which
center
speaks
left.
to the other point that even based on our own history, he's not a radical. Like, he's just kind of like a less racist, less sexist version of the 50s.
Right.
Is basically what this is. When we had like domestic policy that was not, and some international policy that was just less shitty than it is today. So even by our own fucking standards, he's not a radical.
Something else that is coming out of these results is CNN is reporting, and I know we all believe everything CNN says, but that sources are saying Andrew Yang will suspend his campaign after tonight. Eleanor's real torn up about it.
But then how are we going to get universal basic income?
Okay, you're making fun of it, but I guarantee you there are some listeners of this podcast that like Andrew Yang. Now, I think they have...
That's fair. I don't have to like everything the listeners like.
No, I know you don't. But you're mocking them, and that is not nice. That is very rude.
I'm mocking Andrew Yang because we've covered on the show before the ridiculousness of his one issue that is so tunnel vision that he can't even bring himself to talk intelligently about things like climate change. When asked about climate change, he's like, I think it's time to move to higher ground. What kind of fucking answer is that, you jackass? Like, being like, I'm all for UBI. I think the idea that people's value is tied to their ability to do work for a capitalist war machine is fucking atrocious. But that doesn't mean that we can disregard every other issue, in particular things like climate change, because to be honest, climate change is not an issue. It is a stage on which every other issue plays out.
Well, and it's like saying extinction is an issue. Yeah,
right.
Our impending extinction is an issue. It's a massive issue. It kind of dwarfs all other issues.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree that he has been a one-issue candidate, and that issue is important. It's something we should talk about, and I actually am thankful that he has brought it to the public's attention in a way. But I also don't like the idea of I'm rich, so therefore I deserve to be president. I'm not a big fan of that.
No, you don't like Bloomberg?
Speaking of Bloomberg, let's move on to Bloomberg. Bloomberg was caught on someone recorded this, and I think it was in 2015 maybe, or somewhere around there.
It was 2015, yeah.
2015. Someone recorded this without him knowing, so I think he was not speaking at a speech, but he was speaking to, investors or investors in his mayoral campaign or something, but speaking to the inside group, the insiders, the rich and the powerful. And someone recorded this, and it's him basically saying, defending stop and frisk, which most of you listening know. Stop and frisk is this incredibly racist policy that has now been mostly stopped in New York, which the police, this is the one thing I like Mayor de Blasio on, are furious with Mayor de Blasio for ending stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is basically just grabbing any black or Hispanic person on the street and saying, get up against that wall and I'm going to turn your pockets inside out. And if I find anything from a joint to a little open bottle of whiskey or to a gun or to a anything, then you are getting arrested. And sometimes they don't even have to have anything. There are, Matt Taibbi did a great job. He wrote a book reporting on this type of thing where people are arrested for quote unquote loitering in front of their own homes, or look at Eric Garner, for example. So the stop and frisk campaign didn't even need to find something, and it was harassing people. I've seen interviews with, they had an interview with one black man, young man in New York, who said he'd been stopped 60 times over a span of a few years simply for walking around. And so Bloomberg is caught on this recording which I may play on Redacted tonight. I'm hoping to play it on one of my shows. But caught saying that it's a good idea because and he says, when people come up to me and they say, well, New York City's arresting all the minorities for marijuana and not the white people for marijuana. And my response is that's because all the police are in the minority neighborhoods. And why are the police in the minority neighborhoods? Because the minorities are the ones with the guns. Okay? So that's why they're arresting the minorities. The minorities commit the... Oh, yeah, you want to read the Xerox line, yeah.
Well, this is also what he said. He said, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
Oh, I didn't hear that part.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a bucket of fucking Cracker Jack quotes. It's really amazing.
Or cracker quotes.
Right.
Oh.
And then the other thing that he said was just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. He was talking about murder suspects. He said they are male, minorities, 16 to 25. That's it. He's cracked the case.
That's the only people Those are the only people murdering others. That clearly is not taking into account police that kill over 1,000 people a year, and I think most of them are not minorities.
No, well, of course, that doesn't enter into his picture of. But this is like Hillary Clinton, bringing them to heel. What did she
famous
call?
Quote. Super predators.
Super predators, thank you. This is that same kind of thinking, which is why I do think it's funny when people are talking about Bloomberg, they're like, oh, he's such a Republican. Yeah, but also no, because this is the Democratic line too. Democrats are racist. I mean, of course, if you just go back far enough, the Democrats were the party of slavery. Abe Lincoln was the Republican. He was the party of abolition. Not that he wasn't also a horrendous racist that precipitated the largest hanging of Native Americans in U.S. history, but that's another story.
Jeez, you're such a bummer, man.
I know.
What a buzzkill.
But the Democrats are a racist party. It's just that because of the trajectory of the Republicans and because we have a two-party system, it was either vote for the fascists or, the overt racists like Strom Thurmond that basically, were out there saying that we don't believe that black kids have a right to go to school, or you vote for the Democrats that are like, we're racist light. We're those white moderates that Martin Luther King talked about in the letter from Birmingham jail. The idea that like, you know what, justice is a cool idea, but could you like sit down and shut up about it, and then we could get to it like when it's convenient for us.
I mean, not at the lunch counters because those are whites only, but sit down somewhere else.
Exactly. So the idea that Bloomberg is somehow a Republican because he's racist and because he's a billionaire and an asshole is hilarious because those are all traits of the Democrats as well.
True, but he also is a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, he just changed his... He just changed it to a D before his name.
So is Warren, but the idea that the Republicans somehow own him because he is those things is absurd.
A couple more notes on the primaries before we move on to other matters. I'm going to be covering on Redacted Tonight this week a lot of details about Buttigieg. You might have seen him being called CIA Pete on Twitter. That seems to be trending, CIA Pete. And it's because he may not, and then his campaign came out and said, sorry, Pete Buttigieg has never been with the CIA. He may not have been with the CIA, but he is, worked in conjunction with the CIA, which I'll get into more of that on Redacted Tonight, but also... it reminds me of the not Fox News, Simpsons joke about Fox News where there was an episode where they go, Fox News, we're not racist, but we're number one with racists. Well, Buttigieg may not be CIA, but he's number one with the CIA.
Yeah.
He has 218 backers who are CIA, military intelligence. He has by far the most backers that are of the military intelligence state, some of them being very high up. And you have to ask yourself, why does a small town mayor end up with a massive following, endorsements by the CIA and the FBI and the State Department Department and all these U.S. His best man at his wedding is with the department, the unit in USAID that is most responsible for regime change and creating coups in other countries.
And John Kiriakou has some great commentary on this too. John Kiriakou, if you folks might recall, he was the only person to go to jail for the torture program of the CIA because he's the one who blew the whistle on the CIA torture program. But he was talking about how what Buttigieg has done in the past and the companies that he's worked with and been a part of, it just reeks of the CIA. And then, of course, this is John Kiriakou saying this, who was a CIA agent. So
Right.
it just, and he goes through.
Well, one of the funniest ones is his one-day trip to Somaliland.
Right.
So he took a one-day trip, Buttigieg did, when he was 26, I think, or 28, to Somaliland, which claims to be an independent region next to Somalia, and he went with his USAID best friend, and they went for one day and then came back and wrote an op-ed for the New York Times claiming they were tourists in Somaliland.
Which,
now,
that's not a tourist destination.
it's not a tourist destination. John Kiriakou is like, I've been to Somaliland. That is ridiculous. No one goes as a tourist there. But furthermore, if you were going to go as a tourist, it takes forever to get there.
Right.
He had to fly to Djibouti and then take like a 4-hour drive through the desert. Like, this is not a one-day thing you do. That would be insane. So clearly, he was put up to this by someone. It could have been the CIA, could have been his work with McKinsey, the consulting firm, and they have worked with the Defense Department. So it was someone to try and, foster this image of Somaliland and further their independence. But anyway, it's just so hilarious. And he continues to stick by the story that he was just a tourist. So next, let's get into Nevada, the primary coming up. A couple of amazing things are going on in Nevada. The first one, which some of you might have noticed has been going a bit viral, is that Nevada, seeing what happened with the Iowa caucuses, because Nevada is a caucus state, Nevada realized, oh my God, we got to do something. And so they hired Emily Goldman to be their voter protection director. And you think this is great. They got a new voter protection director. Now, Emily Goldman happens to be Buttigieg's Iowa organizer, one of Buttigieg's Iowa organizers. So the idea that after Buttigieg and his friends and his colleagues create the disastrous app in Iowa, they have now hired a Buttigieg person to be the voter protection director. And if you want to talk about the other ridiculous thing that came up in Nevada.
So basically, and I just, every time I hear Emily Goldman's name, it hurts my head because Emma Goldman was an badass anarchist, and Emily Goldman's name is creepily similar. And I feel like that's part of I feel like that's their tactic too. How can we get someone that's super progressive, and it's fucking with me, and I hate it. Anyway.
Yeah, their other director of protection in Nevada is Carla Marx.
So the other thing that's going on with Nevada is they've debuted to volunteers a new iPad-based tool that will be used to calculate math on caucus day.
So in Iowa, there was this app that came out of nowhere. 2 months before Iowa, they decided to create
Which we talked about last week.
If
you
app.
Want to go back?
No, I'm not.
No, I'm just letting folks know.
I thought you were
Calm
afraid.
down.
I thought you were afraid I was going to spend 45 minutes. Okay, all right, easy. I thought you were just afraid I was going to spend 45 minutes on this, but no. It was called Shadow, created by Buttigieg and former Buttigieg conflict of interest people. She's married to a Buttigieg strategist and former Hillary staffers. So then it's this giant catastrophe. So Nevada then said, okay, we are not using that app. Mm-hmm. And now they've unveiled a new tool, a new iPad-based quote-unquote tool, because they don't want to call it an app.
Right, so this app, this tool will be preloaded onto iPads, then distributed to precinct chairs to quote...
I've preloaded my pants over this.
Wait, where?
You know.
I don't know. Okay. It's going to be given on iPads to precinct chairs to, quote, help facilitate the caucus day process. So details about the tool came 2 days after the Nevada Democrats, as Lee mentioned, said that they weren't going to use the apps that were used in Iowa because fuck that nonsense. And a party staffer is on video in telling the volunteers that this is not an app. It should be thought of as a, quote, tool. So,
and then they interview in the article. They interview in the Nevada Independent. They interview someone last name Morrison who's like he's like, I'm a diehard Democrat. I'm volunteering because I want to help out. And he said, but they didn't train us well on this thing. They're not really explaining it well. And Morrison said that there was not a bit of proof at the training that Nevada wouldn't be another Iowa.
Right, and this is another quote from the party. The tool will, quote, flow your precinct early vote data so that
What?
exactly so that you can have the information for your precinct caucus, so that when you do your viability calculations, you're able to get the number of people who voted early, and then when you see the results of your first alignment, you're able to key in that early vote information so that you have every piece of information you need to run your precinct caucus. Those are words that don't go together. And then when a volunteer asked how the results would be transmitted from one place to another, the party staffer said, those are excellent questions, and we're still working out the details around those. So I'll make sure everyone has more information when we're able to share it. That's a direct quote. Basically, how is this going to work? I don't fucking know. We'll figure it out and we'll let you know.
Nice.
That's the response. I think that sounds legit.
By the way, update with 45% in, Sanders still winning with like 28% or something. Buttigieg at like 23, I think it said. And
also going back to this tool app, this tool of an app, basically volunteers were saying that they were just shown this. They were given like they were given a presentation, but there was no hands-on experience. They weren't given the program to work with or practice with. They were just shown a few slides and then told that it was still in development. They were told it's still in development. What the fuck?
See, now this is what makes it so evident that this is not, it's not an accident that this is happening. People are like, oh, it's just incompetence. But it's not really. It's the Iowa Democratic Party and now the Nevada Democratic Party are allowing this incompetence, furthering this incompetence by unveiling things that no one understands and then intentionally don't train people well because they want chaos. They are at the point, here's the thing, if Biden or Buttigieg were running away with this, they would not want chaos. But because Sanders is winning this thing, they want chaos. They want as many of these contests to just be a muddle, to just be a fucking swamp of nonsense so that they can then go, oh, well, we need Bloomberg to save us. Or, oh, well, when we get to the convention, we'll decide. So, everyone will pool their votes against Sanders and you'll have Klobuchar or something running. So they want chaos. It's absolutely like evident.
Yeah, and of course, this is another detail that really speaks to that. Volunteers have really expressed concern that there aren't enough people and that the party is still recruiting volunteers. So that volunteers have been told that they might have to run 2 caucuses at their site if necessary, which of course, if you've ever tried to run an event or any shit like that, you know that you need all the help you can get. And if you have to do more work than you initially expected to do, some shit's going to fall through the cracks. And that shit in this case is any semblance of democracy is just going to fall through these gaping chasms that, as you pointed out, Lee, are specifically put in to these primaries, these caucuses. Sorry.
And there's one last
primaries.
thing. There's one last thing I want to say about these primaries before we get to our other topics, and that is that yes, Bernie Sanders may win New Hampshire, but we don't actually know how much he should have won by, would have won by
Right.
if we weren't voting on black box machines. And now what's so infuriating is the mainstream media, if they have exit polls, which they seem to have some exit polling, because they will talk about the exit polls showing age, oh, this many young people voted, or this many people of color voted. So they do have exit polls, but they're not revealing any of the numbers in terms of votes from the exit polls. And of course, they're going to claim that that's because, oh, well, the exit polling is not reliable, so therefore we're not going to reveal it. But the truth is, the reason they're not revealing exit polls is because it shows fraud. And it showed fraud last time around, and they don't want that to happen again. I mean, that was the biggest reveal that was infuriating people during the last primaries, was Democratic primaries, was that the exit polls were not lining up even remotely with the computer results in many states, and it seemed overly evident. It's like, yeah, you could have an exit poll off by a few percent here and a few percent there, but you're not going to have an exit poll 12% off. No. That's crazy, and that's what was happening in these primaries last time around. So my feeling is that you're probably going to have the same amount of theft, the same amount of fraud done as last time, but we're just not going to know it. We're not going to have any exit polls to compare them to.
Yep.
Okay, so a couple of quick notes before we get to so many good topics coming up. This show is completely funded by you all. There are no ads. There's no promotion. There's no sponsorship by corporations. So it all comes down to you. Patreon.com/commoncensored. And many of you have signed up in the last couple of weeks, and I can't thank you enough. You guys are heroes. We're not asking for tons of money. Many people are signing up at $1 or $4 or whatever. And that's at patreon.com/commoncensored. Thank you for making it possible for us to do this show.
Thank you.
Patreon.com/commoncensored. And you get extra content most weeks as well. Okay, so Eleanor's work, which she's had some amazing articles recently, which you should definitely check out, is at artkillingapathy.com. You put your Roar articles up there too, right?
I did.
Okay. artkillingapathy.com. And I have a new book out that that always makes me laugh. That is at leecampbook.com.
It's rad.
It's not in stores yet. You can do me a favor if you go to an independent bookstore, I don't think Barnes & Noble is worth your time but to try and do this, but just ask them to get Lee Camp's book.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Do it.
So pressure your independent bookstores, because the truth is they have to be, it's not like all books arrive there. It's not like they have to find out about books and think it's worth having there. So if a few of you, honestly, if 3 people were to show up to a indie bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina and say, you should get Lee Camp's book, it's quite possible they would get it and display it. Live shows coming up. I have a book event, but I'm going to be doing stand-up as well. It's going to be a full show, so stand-up, Q&A, a bunch of stuff, and that's in New York City, and all of these upcoming dates you can find at leecamp.com. Click the schedule tab. I'll also be in Dallas and Austin, Texas, Flagstaff, Tucson, Asheville. There's a bunch of places, but the soonest ones are Dallas, Austin, New York City, Washington, D.C., of course. Okay, and text the word censored to 33777 to get our emails and free extra content. And rate us online, do all that stuff. Spread the message of Common Censored. Tell friends to listen. All right, let's jump into some other interesting news that you probably won't hear on your mainstream media.
You definitely won't hear this on your mainstream media. So I've covered this on my show before, and this has been ongoing. It's been escalating in the past few days. Folks might be familiar with it. The Wet'suwet'en people in Canada, the indigenous peoples, have been attacked by RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Mounted Police, which how fucking adorable is that?
Which sounds super adorable until they show up in helicopters and snowmobiles looking like fucking RoboCop.
I know. They're not really funny guys on horseback, but
no.
They sound like it.
So what happened, basically, a lot of things have happened recently, but I'll just give you kind of the Cliff's Notes. And there's also, for people who want to learn more, I definitely recommend that you follow Unistoten Camp, which is the name of their...
it's my sister.
of the area that they've set up in... basically to recognize the hereditary chief's decision to prevent all pipelines from entering their unceded territory.
You should spell that.
I'm going to. Give me a second. I'm also going to put it in the show notes. So it's their Twitter account is Unistoten Camp, which is UNISTOTEN Camp, like Lee's last name.
And I also have a video coming out possibly tomorrow on the Wet'suwet'en as well.
Yes. So basically what happened kind of over the weekend and also on Monday the 10th is that the RCMP arrested 7 Wet'suwet'en folks, including matriarchs outside of their of the Unistoten Healing Center, including the Unistoten Camp founder and spokesperson Frida Hudson, and around 80 individuals have been arrested along the road, and at solidarity actions taking place across Canada, and that's as of yesterday, Monday, February 10th.
But we haven't said why they're being arrested yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Lee. I get so caught up in the yeah. So basically, as I mentioned, the Wet'suwet'en have said the hereditary chiefs have decided that no pipelines will be put onto their territory, and this is unceded territory in Canada, and basically
meaning they never gave it up. So not that those deals should actually matter, because it was like, many of the indigenous thought you can't own land, so who cares if I sign something? But they never gave this land up in Canada, which is what unceded means.
Right. And basically there's a large pipeline project, the CGL, the Coastal GasLink pipeline, that's being planned to basically rape right through Wet'suwet'en territory. And I say that on purpose because colonialism never ended. It just changed toolkits. So this is what they've been fighting. And there's been a huge amount of solidarity. There have been solidarity actions across not just Canada, but also throughout the States. Some of you might have gone to some, actually, and even across the globe, actually. And so these indigenous folks have been fighting this proposed pipeline, and in typical fashion, the police have been serving and protecting the colonialist state. And Justin Trudeau, who's kind of like the Obama version in Canada, has talked a lot about reconciliation. We want to reconcile with the indigenous tribes of Canada. And, he got some photo ops with some indigenous folks.
He wants them to sign a deal in exchange for some blankets.
He's basically doing the sort of Obama thing where he says, oh, I really want to, respect the indigenous folks of this land. But at the same time, he's all about this fucking pipeline, and he's all about fossil fuels, if you look into his history and his present, of course. So the violence against...
He is Mr. Big Oil, yeah.
Yeah. The violence against the Wet'suwet'en has ramped up in the past few days. The matriarchs, as I mentioned, have been arrested. A few of them now have been released. I believe 6 out of 7, as of the recording of this, have been released from jail. But of course, there's, as folks are well aware, just because you're released from jail doesn't mean that the state is done putting its boot on your throat. There's court dates to be dealt with, and of course fines to be dealt with. And
it seems to be gearing up like a Canadian Standing Rock, which would be great in the sense that it could get national and hopefully international solidarity, which is obviously what we're trying to foster as well. But it's obviously not great in terms of the horrific things that have to happen to get people to care about this stuff.
Right.
And there were, similar to Standing Rock, I covered this in the video, they used dogs. They sicked dogs on these people.
Yeah, supporters and defenders have been violently arrested, starting back, it's been ongoing for quite some time, but as I said, it's ramped up, particularly in the last week or so. February 6th, land defenders were violently arrested on the territories, tackled and violently handcuffed and things like that. Dogs were used, as Lee mentioned. Media was banned from filming arrests, so, fuck free press. It was done typically, as we've seen before, in the dead of night, so that there's less chance of folks being awake. They get people totally unawares, which obviously leads to more scrambling and more stress and things like that.
And something I kind of try and stress with these pipeline fights is it's not just about that area, which obviously you should care about these people and care about their area. But when companies, big oil companies, big banks, put in these pipelines, put in the infrastructure for burning fossil fuels, they want to get their money back. They will get their money back. And so basically, the more of these pipelines we put in, the more refining stations we put in, the more drill pads we put in, the more fossil fuels we are going to burn. So if we want to have any chance of stemming the tide of climate change, you have to start by stopping these pipelines, stopping new infrastructure, because these are investments. You should look at each pipeline they put in as an investment towards making billions of dollars later, because these things are not cheap to put in, especially across 1,000 kilometers or whatever. And so this is acknowledging that we are going to burn ridiculous amounts of fossil fuels every time we put in a pipeline. And so this is stopping these is crucially important.
Right. It also speaks to that really important intersection of indigenous rights and environmentalism. And it's something that we cannot disregard when we talk about this issue, because as indigenous folks have said to me, and one in particular, Cherie Foytlin, who created the Loa La Vie camp down in Louisiana to fight the Bayou Bridge pipeline down there, she said, Indigenous-led resistance is the single most important thing when it comes to climate change. And she said, I'm not saying that as some sort of beautiful, heroic bullshit. I'm saying that because we've been here the longest. Our blood has been in this earth for the longest, and we know how to survive, and we know how to take care of this land. And that's a really important point, and something that we really have to recognize as we move forward, that there are people who know how to live in these ecosystems that have done it since time immemorial, who know how to not fuck it up. And those are the people that we should look to, not just because it's right and it's anti-colonialist and anti-imperialist and anti-racist, but also because that's how we survive. Literally, we won't have a future if we don't look to indigenous peoples and lift up these stories and recognize their sovereignty. So I think that is a really important point. And I want to say that there have been, again, as I mentioned, there have been actions in solidarity across Canada and the United States. For instance, on February 10th in British Columbia, nearly 200 trains were affected by the Wet'suwet'en protests, and so it jammed up train traffic across the country. Also, I believe it was today or yesterday, I believe there was the lieutenant governor was supposed to arrive to open a new session of the Legislative Assembly, and basically all outdoor ceremonial aspects of that speech from the throne, literally, including the rolling out of the red carpet, were canceled because indigenous youth and their supporters were occupying the steps of the legislative building. So that's fucking awesome. So yeah, and there's, for folks who are interested in taking action, you can go, and I will also put this in the show notes, you can go to unistoten.camp. Again, that's unistoten.camp, like Lee's last name. And there's a link there for the Wet'suwet'en Supporter Toolkit 2020. And it talks about how you can support, either donating, taking action where you live, coming to support them physically, fundraising, and educating, and building solidarity. So these are all things that you can learn more about by going to their website, but it's incredibly important, again, for a multitude of reasons and a multitude of intersections, that we pay attention to this fight and help stop this pipeline.
So moving on, some good news. Greg Palast, the investigative journalist who I'm pretty good friends with, has won a big lawsuit in Georgia against Governor Kemp, and the judge ruled, so basically, and Palast has been working at this for 6 years. He's been trying to get the list of purged names, purged voters that Governor Kemp has knocked off the rolls. over 100,000, hundreds of thousands of people knocked off the voting rolls. And Kemp has refused...
Through interstate cross-checked, correct?
Through interstate cross-check, which I'll explain a little about that in a minute. But and for years, Kemp has refused to reveal those names. And finally, a judge, and actually this was a bit of a shock, because not only did the judge side with Palast, but I believe, didn't even see the need for a trial and just decided that Kemp has no standing to fight this.
Damn.
Yeah. And so the hundreds of thousands list will be revealed to Greg Palast, and these purge lists Palast has recorded are 99.9% incorrect. 99.9%. Because what it is, and some of you have maybe heard us cover interstate crosscheck before, but the idea, which was created by Republicans, created by Chris Kobach in Kansas, is to take off a bunch of names because you claim that they are the same as other names in other states, and therefore it is a voter trying to vote twice in multiple states. And so they purge an endless number of names. And you might think, why does that help them? Because you'd be purging as many Republicans as Democrats, as many, far left, as moderate left, as right wing. But in fact, it heavily purges black people, Asian people, and Hispanic people. They tend to have more similar names and last names. And so therefore, these lists, when you go through them, are very heavily weighted on the side of basically people of color. And 99.9% are incorrect. They claim, now if you were to sit Governor Kemp down and say, why would you do this? He would say, well, don't worry, because we compare the full name, so the middle name has to match too, and we compare the social security number. So you're only purged if all those things match up in multiple states. But that's 100% false. They purge people who have the same first and last name. They don't give a fuck about the middle name, and they don't give a fuck about the social security number. So they just purge tons of people from the rolls. These people show up. They're told they're not on the rolls. They then fill out a provisional ballot that will never be counted, because a provisional ballot is like farting into a dream catcher, okay? That is the maximum effect you will get from your vote. So Palast has been fighting this for 6 years, and this was a huge win, this lawsuit, and hopefully it creates a snowball effect where not only do other states then also reveal the names they've purged from their rolls as well, but once those names are evident and you can look at them and prove that these are 99% incorrect and should not be purged, hopefully the whole interstate crosscheck, which, by the way, has been used in 28 or 30 states, hopefully the whole thing will fall apart.
Yeah, definitely something to watch.
I mean, it's a horrifying trick to just make sure people of color are not voting. And it's also how you end up with polling not equaling the what you expect in the general election. So, Hillary Clinton, and, we say plenty of horrible things about Hillary Clinton, but this happens to be true. Hillary Clinton was probably doing better than she actually did in the election because of this purging. So,
yeah, and it's basically, people will talk about these things like a continuation of Jim Crow. It really is, because nowadays it's frowned upon to physically stop black folks or Hispanic folks from voting.
It is lightly frowned upon.
But you can still do it. You just got to be more covert about it.
You just got to pretend it's double voters. You
Right?
know, all those people who vote in one state, then jump in their car on election day, hightail it to another state, put on a fake mustache, and try and vote again.
Because, right, in this country, we have a problem with people voting too much, right?
Oh, my God.
that's
so many times. I voted in 4 states one time. It was a lot of driving, but it was worth it. You get at one of those areas where, like, the 4 states, the corners aren't that far away, and, it's super fun.
We are
moving on to another court case.
Yes. Today, February 11th, was the first day of the trial of the embassy protectors, which folks will know that we've talked about. For folks who aren't familiar, there's plenty of information out there. You can go to defendembassyprotectors.org to learn more about it. But it's basically folks who decided to stand up to U.S. imperialism by staying inside, by holding space and staying inside the Venezuelan embassy at the invitation of the democratically elected Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro.
And you've probably, if you watch any Redacted VIP, I've had them on at various times, and
And I've had them on
they're
too.
wonderful people.
Yeah, they're fucking awesome, and it's 4 of them, and they are on trial for holding space at the Venezuelan embassy. So if you're in DC, do go. If you're not, again, you can go to defendembassyprotectors.org to find out more about it and to help build solidarity.
And we don't know how many days this will go, right?
So I was at the pretrial hearing, and both the defense and the prosecution said that they expected it to be roughly 3 days. So it might be over by the end of this week. Each defendant is facing up to a year in jail and a $100,000 fine for, being anti-imperialist.
They were told that they were warned they were trespassing in a building that they were invited to be in by the rightful owners who were paying the bills. And then they were arrested for getting in the way of security functions, which supposedly these security functions were supposed to be to, I don't know, protect the building, but in fact they were used to try and harass the people in the building and make sure they don't get food or water or electricity.
And another interesting point
it's like a Rorschach, not a Rorschach, an MC Escher painting where you're like, it's all upside down and backwards, and you're like, wait, what?
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that they're not even being charged with trespassing. Like, that's not what they're on trial for, which just makes it even more of a clusterfuck.
And in these trials, any of these ridiculous political trials where it's really a banana court, I mean, that's what this is. And to bring up Kariakou,
do you mean kangaroo court?
Well, I was using banana because of Banana Republic, but okay.
Oh.
Kangaroo court. Same
Is
idea.
I didn't even know that was a saying.
I've heard people shift Banana Republic to Banana Court, but okay. Kangaroo court.
No, I honestly didn't know, because I have a tendency to not know American sayings. So
It's a kangaroo.
I'm asking because I want to learn, Lee.
It's a kangaroo eating banana, is what it is.
Oh my God, that sounds adorable.
To bring up Kariakou for the second time in this episode, he has explained what his trial was like because he was a whistleblower on torture. So they basically didn't allow any evidence whatsoever of why he did what he did, why he felt it was important, why revealing this torture to the American public was important. They didn't allow any of that. And similarly, in the Embassy Protector trial, the judges said that there can't be anything political in the trial, which is laughable because the whole
absurd.
thing is political.
Yeah.
And she has said, or it is just established, that in the court system, whoever the president of the United States says is the president of another country is the president of that other country. So therefore, inside this courtroom, Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela, and no one is allowed to say otherwise. No one's allowed to mention otherwise. These defendants cannot stand up and go, but Maduro is the president of Venezuela, or they'll be held in contempt and possibly locked away for doing that. So the idea that you like live in a bizarro world as you try and defend yourself.
Right.
It's so fucking laughable. And they're not even allowed to mention things like Guaido and stuff. So really, if they were on the stand, I don't know if they're going to end up testifying or not, but if they were on the stand, they were asked why they did it, they couldn't say any of the politics, so they'd have to be like, I sat in building because yes.
Well, and we'll see.
They're not allowed to say.
We'll see how it plays out, because at the pretrial hearing, it was unclear whether they'd be completely banned from talking about why they were there in the first place. But it seems very clear that the judge is definitely leaning towards the government's position, which is, it doesn't matter why you were there, it just matters that you were there, which is fucking absurd. It's like saying it doesn't matter the context as to why you stole something or why you killed someone, it just matters that you did it, and that's fucking absurd. So yeah, today was mostly jury selection, from what I understand. Might have been some opening statements, but tomorrow, February 12th, is when the main trial is expected to kick off. So do follow updates. I'll try to tweet some of what I see. I'm going in the morning, but doubtless the folks will be giving updates. And again, I'll try to I will put that in the show notes. The Embassy Protectors this website.
So moving on with our theme of courts and arrests, let's talk about Julian Assange for a minute. The prisoners in Belmarsh prison, this horrible British prison where he's being held, the fellow prisoners, were so disgusted that he was stuck in solitary confinement, something like 23 hours a day, despite being a publisher, that they went on strike or, their various ways of fighting back, and ultimately have gotten Assange out of solitary confinement.
Yeah, so he's been moved. I talked about this on my not my podcast. Well, it's also a podcast, but on my show.
Bragger.
On my show, and he's been moved to a different part of Belmarsh where he's able to have interactions with up to 40 other prisoners. So that's better than solitary, but we should definitely make sure that we make it clear it's not like, oh, now you get to be in like the
cushy,
like the cushy fucking the part of Belmarsh. There is no cushy part of Belmarsh.
The Martha Stewart prison,
right,
where she gets to spend most of her day gardening.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting to, as you notedly, to bring up the fact that Assange is only in this position because of other prisoners at Belmarsh. So basically, I have it here. The WikiLeaks ambassador Joseph Farrell said in a statement about the move a couple of weeks ago that the decision to relocate Assange is also a massive victory of prisoners at Belmarsh. A group of inmates have petitioned the prison governor on 3 occasions, insisting that the treatment of Assange was unjust and unfair. After meetings between prisoners' lawyers and the Belmarsh authorities, Assange was moved to a different prison wing. So I mentioned this in my show. It's super interesting here because Belmarsh is a maximum security prison, right? It's only used for the quote unquote, worst humans that they have in the UK, right? It's the fucking, dregs of society, the worst of the worst. And here they are being like, hey, you guys are being dicks. Stop being dicks. And it's like, it just completely like turns on its head that idea that the moral superiority and the moral authority will always be just and fair, whereas the people in prison are there because they don't have the ability to be just and fair.
And as his extradition hearing comes up, I think more and more people, it's tough to hear someone really nowadays go after Assange. I think more and more people are understanding that this is a repulsive, disgusting, just tearing up of justice. It's morally repulsive on every level. Every meaningful charge that has ever been held against him was dropped or not investigated because it was bullshit. And every charge that the Trump administration wants to bring against him is fucking horrifying for freedom of press. It sets the worst precedent imaginable for being a journalist, for being an investigator, for any sort of revealing of truth. It is so repulsive that this guy has been locked up. And as I was saying to some people the other night, he and WikiLeaks represented the greatest threat the American empire has had in probably 20 or 30 years in a lot of ways. Far more threatening than the planes on 9/11, because the U.S. military, the U.S. empire knows how to deal with military operations. They know how to deal with let's bomb the shit out of these people. They don't know how to deal with their crimes being revealed to the world. And so they are crushing him for it. And I know people know this, but it just needs to keep being repeated that Julian Assange deserves his freedom. He deserves statues made of him, and it's fucking repulsive that we're even in this situation. There are some actions coming up. The website to go to is Action for Assange, the number 4, action4assange.com. That will show you where the actions are. Many of them are in D.C., but I know there's a lot of international ones as well. And those are happening in just a couple of weeks. It starts on Monday, February 24th. And there's ways to help out with that. There's ways to donate. But the ones on that page are in Washington, D.C. But I know there's many other cities. So.
Yeah, and also kind of in that same vein, a new website was launched a couple of weeks ago for Chelsea Manning as well. It's releasechelsea.com, and it keeps you up to date on what day it is of her unjust incarceration. It's day 335 of her incarceration, with $226,000 in fines as of February 11th.
Of her incarceration, lest we remind you, for doing nothing. She was
Right.
already released for her so-called crimes before, and now they're just holding her because she refuses to lie about Julian Assange.
And yeah, and she refuses to go up to the grand jury to tell them shit she's already said, and that she's made that very clear. Everything that the grand jury would ask me, I've already made very clear in the statements that I made to the court previously, and I have nothing else to say. And grand juries are inherently undemocratic, and they're used basically to bring activists to heel and throw them back in jail. And so she refuses to speak to a grand jury, and she's basically being held illegally, on top of just fucking unjustly being held illegally in jail for that. So, and to further connect these two, the UN rapporteur on torture has said that the treatment of both Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange is torture, and that it should stop immediately. So, yeah, that's that's the great empire. So I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes, but it's releasechelsea.com, and it also tells you how you can help out as well.
So that is our show. I'll give you the final update before we get off the air. I know that if you're listening to this, you probably know what's going to happen in the future, but I'll tell it anyway, that Bernie Sanders is still winning, something like 27% to 23.5%. And he's winning by 6,000 votes. That's with about 50% reporting in New Hampshire. But I think the thing people should notice is he's winning the popular vote by a lot in 2 straight states, despite and he did win the Iowa popular vote, even though they want to claim Buttigieg won the state delegate equivalent bullshit. So people should realize that he is winning the popular vote in all these states, despite endless media attacks, despite endless DNC attacks. I mean, the fact that he could do this well up against that machine is truly phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's the show, but honestly, you guys keep us going. Patreon.com/commoncensored. If you feel you got $1 or $2 or $4 out of this episode, go to patreon.com/commoncensored. I'm coming to Dallas, Austin, New York City, Washington, D.C. Eleanor is coming to perform in Denver. What's that date?
March 19th.
19th. And where
And
are they?
information about that, if you just go to the performance page on artkillingapathy.com, it'll take you to the ticket link. Artkillingapathy.com is also the home for all of the other shit that I do, so check it out.
Thank you, guys. Keep fighting.
Act out.